I am presenting Union Gospel Press's Sunday School lesson number 13, Sunday, August 28th, 2022. The lesson is entitled Miracles on Malta. Lesson text comes from Acts chapter 28, verses 1 through 10. Related scriptures are Acts 27, 1 through 44. The place is Malta. The time is 59 or 60 AD. We have been looking at how God brought healing through Jesus and some of his servants. This week we see how God used Paul and his faith. Today's aim, facts, to show the events that took place on Malta and how God worked healings through faith. Principle, to teach that God answers the prayer of faith. Application, to encourage faith in God, who has promised to answer our prayers when we put our trust in him. Illustrating the lesson, faithfulness in difficult storms of life often opens the doors for ministry to others. Practical points. 1. God always has the right people in the right place at the right time to accomplish his purpose. Acts 28, 1 through 2. 2. No task is too demeaning for a good teacher, a good leader. Acts 28, 3, John 13, 4 through 5. 3. God's protective hand is upon us even when we do not realize danger's presence. Acts 28, 3 through 4. 4. Never let the unexpected cause you to doubt God's clear promises. 28, 5 through 6, 23, 11. 5. One of the best ways to evangelize is to serve others in Jesus' name. 28, 7 through 9. 6. God often meets our needs in unimagined ways. Verse 10. Golden text. Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. Acts 28, 8. Today we have 3 lesson outlines. The first is hospitality extended. Acts 28, 1 through 2. The second is a miracle observed. Acts 28, 3 through 6. And the third is miracles performed. Acts 28, 7 through 10. Introduction. As Christians, we get used to serving Christ in the ordinary routines of life. If we are serious about our walk with him, we thank him daily. We thank him for daily necessities, read the Bible regularly, and worship often with his people. We also instruct our families in his ways, try to glorify him at work, and seek opportunities to share our faith with others. But there are times when our routines are disrupted and we find ourselves in situations in which our usual spiritual habits do not seem to fit. We may be on vacation in an unfamiliar country or with an unusual schedule. We may be in the hospital for surgery or recuperating from it at home. But the experience of the Apostle Paul teaches us that the Lord opens doors of service even when things are not normal. In fact, it can be argued that Paul never had the luxury of a normal life. His witness took him through very disruptive experiences, including beatings, riots, imprisonment, and shipwrecks. In this week's lesson, we find him on a foreign island among unfamiliar people. Yet even there, God opened opportunities for him to minister. Hospitality extended. Acts 28, 1. And when they were escaped, then they knew that the islands was called Malta. Verse 2. And the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received us everyone, because of the present rain and because of the cold. The location, Acts 28, 1. Paul, who was being taken to Rome to appeal to the emperor the case the Jews had brought against him, was on a ship that had been driven by a storm and grounded on an island. Only after the travelers went ashore did they learn that the island was Malta, today called Malta, though the sailors had probably landed at its main port, Valeta. Many times they had not recognized the spot on the eastern coast where they ran aground. The island's name comes from the Phoenician Canaanite word for refuge and was so named by the Phoenician sailors who had colonized it about 1000 BC. It is a small island about 18 miles long and 18 miles wide, located about 60 miles south of Sicily. It was a one-time part of Carthage Empire, but the Romans captured it in 218 BC. They gave it considerable independence but appointed a supervising officer. The reception, Acts 28:2. Luke recorded that the barbarous people showed us no little kindness. Barbarous people, translated barbarians in verse 4, does not mean savage or crude persons. It was used by the Greeks and later the Romans to describe people who were not of themselves, especially those who spoke with unintelligible sounds. These islanders no doubt used the Carthaginian dialect of the Phoenician language unknown to Greeks and Romans. They proved to be hospitable to the stranded travelers. The islanders demonstrated no small degree of kindness, an understated way of saying their kindness was extraordinary. They built a fire and welcomed every one of the castaways. It must have been a sizable fire, for there were 276 travelers, and all of them were accommodated. The welcoming fire was greatly appreciated in view of the cold, rainy weather. Most likely the high winds of the storm had abated, but it was still raining. It was also cold, since winter was coming on, Acts 27:9-12. Besides all this, they had just come ashore through frigid waters, so they were drenched and shivering. The islanders, though pagan, showed a human kindness that even Christians regrettably have sometimes lacked. A miracle observed. Verse 3. And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. Verse 4. And when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hang on his hand, they said among themselves, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he have escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffereth not to live. Verse 5. And he shook off the beast into the fire and felt no harm. Verse 6. Howbeit they looked when he should have swollen or fallen down dead suddenly. But after they had looked a great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. Paul's snake bite, Acts 28:3. As Paul had assumed a useful role on the ship during the storm, so he continued to make himself useful on land. He gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, recognizing that without additional fuel, the welcome fire would soon die out. It speaks well of his Christ-like character that he not only took leadership and gave commands when necessary, but now also assumed a menial role. But a hidden danger lurked. As he put the sticks on the fire, a viper was driven out of the bundle by the heat, and it fastened itself on his hand. Some have questioned the truth of this account because today Malta has no poisonous snakes of any kind in very little wooded area. This argument is irrelevant though. For over the centuries, small islands can change considerably due to population growth and the advent of a more advanced pattern of living. The viper was a poisonous snake and was recognized as such by the islanders. Having lain on the ground or perhaps among the sticks, stiff in the cold, it was quickly revived by the heat of the fire. Before Paul realized it was there, it had bitten his hand. The people's interpretation, Acts 28:4. The superstitious islanders quickly reached their own conclusion when they saw the snake dangling from Paul's hand. They thought he was a murderer, whom though he have escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffereth not to live. Though the centurion had allowed Paul some freedom to gather wood, it was probably clear to those who looked on that he was a prisoner. This, followed by the snake bite, would have convinced them that he was a bad person. Paul could not escape this destiny, they believed. A murderer might survive the storm and seem to be safe, but vengeance would catch up with him and punish him. The Greek word here more often means justice, and sometimes it was personified to mean an actual goddess who punished the guilty. Thus, the islanders may have been referring to this deity, or perhaps they were simply personifying divine retribution. In either case, they expected Paul to die shortly. A change of opinion, Acts 28, 5 through 6. Paul, however, shook off the beast into the fire and felt no harm. His well-being could not be explained by claiming that the snake had not really bitten him or that it was not really poisonous. The islanders looking on were familiar with the snake involved and had seen it actually hanging from his hand. Paul's survival was due to divine protection, just as he and his comrades had been protected during the storm. The Lord chooses many different methods to bear witness to himself in a sinful world and assure his own people of his direction. He had reassured Paul and displayed his power to those with him by preserving their lives and bringing them safe to shore. Now God was reassuring Paul again that he would safely reach Rome, and he was manifesting his power to both islanders and voyagers to incite saving faith in them. The Maltese people were awed by what they saw. They expected to see Paul swell up or even suddenly fall down dead. These would be signs of the venom taking its toll. But after they watched him for a while, they saw that he remained unharmed. How long this time span was is left to speculation, but it was long enough to convince them that they had been wrong. Now, in a wild swing of opinion, the people concluded that Paul was a god. Superstitious pagans, devoid of any revelation of the true God, were greatly impressed by the phenomena in nature. Unfavorable events were interpreted as signs of disfavor by the gods, and favorable ones as signs of their blessing. When the events such as this one absolutely defiled nature, they concluded that deity was present with them. A similar event had occurred earlier in Paul's ministry, though the outcome was the opposite. At Lystra, the Lord had used Paul to heal a lame man, Acts 14, 8 through 10. The people there concluded that Paul and Barnabas were gods, and they prepared to offer sacrifices to them, verses 11 through 13. It was only with difficulty that the apostles dissuaded them from it, verses 14 through 18. But then hostile Jews arrived and turned the populace against the apostles, and Paul was stoned, verse 19. In the absence of biblical convictions, human nature is extremely fickle. It is left at the mercy of error, emotion, and persuasive impostors. Thus, we must always take care not to think or act on the basis of popular opinion, lest we be dragged from one extreme of error to another. Rock-like stability belongs to those who attach themselves to the eternal truths of God's word. Miracles performed. Verse 7. And in the same quarters were possessions of the chief man of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and lodged us 3 days courteously. Verse 8, and it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and of a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. Verse 9, so when this was done, others also which had diseases in the island came and were healed. Verse 10, who also honored us with many honors, and when we departed, they lauded us with such things as were necessary. The healing of Publius' father, Acts 28, 7 through 8. Though Paul's miraculous preservation, God opened up new avenues of ministry for him. This These began with the temporary stay with Publius, the chief man of the island. His estate lay in the region where the shipwreck had occurred, the northeast sector of Malta. In calling him the chief or first man of the island, Luke was probably using his official title, for two inscriptions found on Malta use the exact terminology. Publius, a Latin name, implies that he was a Roman. As the chief official of Malta, Publius served under the governor of Sicily, to which province Malta belonged. Luke referred only to his first name, perhaps because the islanders themselves did so, or possibly because of the cordial relationship they developed. Publius wrote, Luke received us and lodged us 3 days courteously, verse 7. He gave the shipwreck survivors a gracious reception. Us probably refers to the entire group. Though this was a large number of people, Publius probably had sufficient accommodations for all. The stay, however, was only temporary, only until they could be lodged at other places for their 3-month stay on the island, verse 11. Publius's hospitality brought him an unexpected reward, the healing of his father, verse 8. His father lay sick of a fever and a bloody flux, dysentery. The Greek actually reads fevers, indicating the recurring nature of the fever. This intestinal ailment may have been which has been called Malta fever, which is common on the island. It has been traced to a microbe in goat's milk. Entering the presence of this sick man, Paul prayed for him, laid his hands on him, and healed him. Earlier, Paul had been acclaimed as a god, but his praying would make it clear that he was dependent on a deity himself. It would also keep people from assuming that the healing came from his own power. Laying on hands was a symbolic act signifying the impartation of a divine benefit. In this case, the restoration of health. 9:17 through 18. With this healing, Paul demonstrated that the God he served had power not only to protect him from a snake's venom, but also to restore health to others. It was also a rapid-fire fulfillment of Jesus' promise that his followers would take up serpents and lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. Mark 16:8. The healing of others. Acts 28:9. Just as the miracles of Jesus had drawn huge crowds to him, so this display of apostolic authority by Paul soon led many others to seek healing. Luke tells us that others, literally the rest, also which had diseases in the island, came and were healed. This did not mean that every single sick person on Malta was healed, but that people came from every quarter where the news had spread. This is indeed a curious set of circumstances. As a prisoner, Paul was unable to go to them. They came to him, one who was confined under the accusation of being a criminal, to be healed, and the good he did for them was an evidence of the falseness of those charges, not only to the islanders but also to the Roman soldiers who kept him confined. The word translated healed in Acts 28:9 differs from the one in the previous verse. It is a general term indicating that they were cared for, treated, cured, or healed. It allowed for the possibility that not all cures were miraculous. Perhaps Luke, the physician, had occasion to use his skills for them as well. In reading this account, we must be careful to avoid the conclusion that Paul's entire ministry on Malta consisted of healing. Though Luke said nothing of evangelism, we may be sure from Paul's other ministry and teachings that he used the miracles as a means of introducing the populace to the saving power of Jesus Christ. To do less than this would have been a betrayal of his calling. 1 Corinthians 9:16. We must also avoid the conclusion that miracles will always accompany the preaching of the gospel. The book of Acts does indeed record many miracles, but these were necessary to accredit Christ's message in a strongly pagan environment. The decline of miracles in later times need not mean a decline in the church. It means simply that God sovereignly uses or withholds miracles to suit his purposes. The islanders' gratitude, Acts 28:10. The Maltese showered the travelers with many honors. We do not know what forms these honors took, but it surely means they continued to give them lavish hospitality for the rest of their stay. It was extended to the whole party because one man, Paul, showed his faith by giving himself to others. Favorable sailing conditions returned after 3 months, and the travelers boarded a ship to continue their journey to Rome, verse 11. Luke said, when we departed, they, the Maltese, lauded us with such things as were necessary, verse 10. This was a considerable amount, since the shipwreck had taken all they owned. What could have been a bleak chapter in Paul's life became a time of fulfillment for him and blessing for others. It confirmed for him that the Lord accompanied him in all circumstances, and that all good things work together for good to them that love God, Romans 8:28. As he continued his journey, Paul knew that Rome, like Malta, could be a new fertile field in which to sow the seed of the gospel. Questions. 1. What did the Greeks and Romans mean when they referred to others as barbarous people? Acts 28:2. 2. What did the islanders do for the travelers when they arrived? 3. Why did the people first think Paul was a murderer? 4. Why did they soon afterward conclude he was a god? 5. What did Publius do for the voyagers? 6. What unexpected benefit did Publius's hospitality have for him? 7. When Paul prayed for the healing of Publius's father, what did this demonstrate to others? 8. Why did the islanders go to Paul to be healed and not he to them? 9. Why is it safe to surmise that Paul's ministry on Malta included more than just healing? 10. How did the Maltese show their thanks when the travelers left? This concludes the Sunday School lesson for Sunday, August 28th, 2022. Thank you for listening. God bless.